This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, we have a very interesting topic this morning, and the connection to the Parsha is as follows. The beginning of the Parsha talks about the two Jewish midwives, Shifra and Pua, Yocheved and Miriam, and how they assisted the pregnant women in delivering, and they were the predecessors of all future midwives and birthing coaches and so forth. It's interesting that Christian thought used to be that if a woman would have assistance giving birth, it was actually considered heretical. Because the Bible says, Be'etzev tel dibanim, it's supposed to hurt. So to have any kind of midwife or any kind of assistance or any tool or device or procedure that would make it easy was considered against the Bible. And in fact, Lord Emmanuel Sachs writes in his book, A Jewish Medical Ethics, that in France there was a woman who used a midwife, and the woman who was pregnant, the woman who delivered, and the midwife, they were both executed. They were both executed. Why? It's against the Bible. It's against the Bible. So you would think that was 500 years ago. Well, not until 1949. In 1949, the church reversed its opinion about using anesthesia. Until 1949, it was considered sacrilegious to use anesthesia. It was considered sacrilegious. 1949, the church, in one of their regular reversals, they allowed the use of anesthesia. Okay, and very interesting. In the 50s, there was a doctor named Dr. Lamaz. He travels to the Soviet Union, and he learns the different breathing techniques that are known as Lamaz, right? So let's start off by seeing what Rav Moshe has to say about Lamaz, okay? What this has to do with anything, I'm not sure. But
Lamaz is helping.
Lamaz, the breathing exercise.
Yes,
I'll tell you. Look at number 18. We'll start. We'll start with the end. Rav Moshe writes. Look at number 18. Look at number 18. This is the topic today is going to be about when a woman becomes a nida during childbirth. But Rav Moshe was asked the following question. A woman said she doesn't want to use anesthesia. She doesn't want to be put out. She wants to remain awake for the entire birthing process. How's she going to do it? The breathing. He-ha, you know how it goes. So, look at number 18. So, Me'emasai asa liga b'ishtay kaidem leidasa. Okay, so Rav Moshe writes, B'dvar masha ishtay writes aliyas ne'ura b'shas leidasa. A woman wants to remain awake. Mitam sha'imrim, because she says, Shiur hachav le'leida kala ma'at. How is she going to get by the pain of the childbirth? B'zeh shetasiach daite min atzar. She'll focus her mind on something else, right? That's the whole concept behind Lamaz. You focus on the breathing, so your mind is focused on breathing and not on the pain. So Rav Moshe says, if they would ask me, I would not recommend using this Lamaz. It hurts too much. This Lamaz ain't going to help you. It's just a scam. It's a scam. The whole thing is a scam. Harama. It's a scam. Yeah. If that's what she wants, if she's already been, brainwashed by common culture that this is what she needs, okay, we'll let her do it. It's not usher, but Rav Moshe says it's harama ba'alma. It's not something that actually works. Okay. So in any event, we'll begin over there. And that is, we want to talk about the inyan of when a woman gives birth, when does she become a nida? Now, B'chlal, we know that, we'll start something about the Parsha. We know that Shifra and Pua, they were rewarded, right, for helping the Jewish women give birth. What was their reward? Vayas lohem batim. And Rashi brings down they were rewarded with what? Bate kahuna, bate levia, bate malchus. Kahuna and levia came from Yocheved, and malchus came from Miriam. How from Miriam? Through Kalev. Right? So the question is, why were they rewarded specifically to have Kahuna, Levia, and Malchus? Why did Hashem specifically give them that reward? That Kahuna, Levia, and Malchus should come out of them? So the Brisker Rav explains that what would have happened had Paro been successful in his plan? So you wouldn't have had any Jewish men, right? Why? They would have killed all the boys, but there still would have been Jewish women, right? So what would have happened? The Jewish women would have married the Mitzrim, producing what? Finding Yidden, Jews. Yeah. So what exactly was Paro looking to abolish? All the institutions in Judaism that follow the father, which are Kahuna, Leviah, and Malchus. So Midah Keneged Midah, they were rewarded because they restored, they maintained, they upheld Kahuna, Leviah, and Malchus. That was the reward. Okay.
How come they let the Levian not do work? Of course, they were put class. Once Yosef established that, that's a separate class.
Yeah, so Yosef already instituted the rule.
And the Levian weren't part of the
The Leviim were not part of the Shiva. Not part of the Shiva. Okay, so
you let them go.
so that's we said we're on the topic of the midwives. Wanted to know, when does a woman become a nida? During childbirth. Okay. And B'chlal, we're going to talk about, is a husband permitted to be in the room during childbirth? Is he permitted to offer moral support? Hold her hand? Well, hold her hand. She's a nida. She's a nida. You can't have contact with her. So that's the question. Could you assist her into the hospital? These are all questions that arise during child. And when does she become a nida during childbirth? That's the central issue. When does she become a nida? And we're going to see, well, when are you allowed to be mechalo Shabbos for a woman who's in childbirth? And is the point that you're allowed to be mechalo Shabbos for a woman in childbirth the same point that she's considered a nida? Okay, so let's look into this.
What?
In other words, there may be two different criteria. The point that a woman is considered a besakana, to be mechal Shabbos for her, may be a different halachic point than the point that she becomes a nida in terms of the harchakos anida. Okay. Now, the first thing we have to understand is that we all know that to have relations with one of the arayos is an isser dairaisa, and it's yehareg v'al yavar. A person has to give up their life. What about other forms of kreva that are not actual relations? Let's say chibuk, nishuk. Let's say other forms of affection to an erva. Is that an isser dairaisa? Is that included in arayos that's yehareg v'al yavar, or is that only an isser drabana? So the Rambam's opinion is, look at number 2. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Yisrei Bia Perek Chaf Aleph, Halacha Aleph, Kol Haba Al Erva Min Arayos Derech Evarim. Anyone who has relations with an erva, Oy Shechibek, or if somebody hugs, Venishek, or kisses Derech Taiva, in an affectionate manner, Venene Bekir Basar, or has any kind of pleasure with korva, hareza loikim minatar. It's an isser dairais, and you get malchus for it. Okay, so the Rambam's opinion is, not only do you get malchus for relations, but any form of korva. If somebody for chibuk, for nishuk, or according to those who maintain that, let's say, shaking a hand, right? That's a topic in and of itself. For those who hold shaking hands is derech korva, and that's, we could discuss at a different occasion. They would say you get malchus medayrais and it's yaharig v'al yavar.
It's not the korva, it's okay?
Then is it okay? Not necessarily, but you don't get malchus medayrais.
The Rambam's lesson is derech taiva, right?
Yeah.
So
He says
Taiva.
taiva. If
Taiva,
you
yeah.
kiss someone, it's not taiva. Taiva is a very strong.
Okay, well, without getting into specific at this moment, yeah, derech taiva means with affection, yeah.
other than desire.
Taiva is desire. Desire.
Different from affection.
Yeah. Hareza loikim minatayra.
Desire than affection.
Yeah. For that you get malchus. That's the opinion of the Rambam, that not only for the relations themselves, but any sign of korva, any sign of closeness, you get malchus midairaisa. Okay? And this comes from the pasuk, Rabbi Glatstein, Parshas Achrimos, Ish al kol she'er b'sarai, lo'isikravu l'galei sever. In other words, the Torah is not just saying the relations themselves are prohibited, but anything that leads to it, whether it's chibuk, whether it's nishuk, or any type of korva, that is also an isser dairaisa, and that is included in isser arayis of yehareg v'al yavar. So in other words, according to the Rambam, not only does a person have to give up their life for the relations themselves, but anything that constitutes derech korva is also yehareg ve'al yavam. That's the opinion of the Rambam. Does everybody agree to this?
No.
No. Okay, that you should know by now, right? No. This is the opinion of the Rambam. Then the Rambam writes the same thing in the Sefer HaMitzvos, and Loisa Se Shin Nun Gimel number 4, V'HaMitzvah HaShin Nun Gimel, Hi Shehiziranu Mikirov La'achas Mikal Elu Arayos Afilu B'loi Bia. Approaching any of the Arayos, even without Bia, is also an Isser D'Oraisa. K'gan Chibuk, V'Neshika, V'Adam Mi Pe'ulos Haznos. Okay, so here the Rambam does not specify Derech Taiva, but he says any form of korva is an Isser D'Oraisa, and that's the general understanding of the Rambam. However, if you look at the Maggid Mishnah on the Rambam, the Maggid Mishnah points out that this is the Rambam's opinion. The Ramban disagrees. The Ramban holds that this drasha of Leisikrevu is only asmachta ba'alma, and chibuk, nishuk, and all these other types of intimacy are only an Isser D'Rabbanan, according to the Ramban. That's what the Maggid Mishnah writes in number 5. Zed das Rabbeinu. Aval Ramban nechlak olav. The Ramban disagrees. B'hasagoy shechibra al sefer hamitzvos. B'yamar. And the Ramban holds shehadrasha azoy shebesifrei ina el asmachta. It is only an illusion. Ve'ein bekan malchus min haTorah ela b'bia gemura oy b'hara. Says the Ramban, only actual relations are asur midaraisa. Everything else is an isur d'Rabbanan. By the way, what is the majority opinion in this matter? Most Rishonim agree to the Rambam that it's an isur d'Oraisa and it's yehareg ve'al yavam. Okay, that's mainstream halacha. We'll see later in the Shulchan Aruch and the Shach. Okay, this is just an introduction. Keep this in mind, that when it comes to chibuk, nishuk, and let's say holding hands, on the one hand you could say, well, that's not really derech korva. That's just maybe derech eretz. That would be a good way to say it, right? Or you could say no. You know, if I'm walking with you on the street, we're not holding hands. Otherwise, people can think we're nuts, right? Holding hands is derech korva, right? That case could be made. That debate we could perhaps have. But certainly, if you do consider it derech korva, according to the Rambam and most Rishonim, would be an Isser D'Oraisa. Yeah.
If one person is in a hospital and he's handled by a female nurse,
so we have to see. We have to see. We will talk about that today. According right now, it would seem that it might be problematic, unless you say that since it's not derech korva, it's just they're not doing it for any type of relationship. They're doing it for a professional cause. So then maybe it would be permitted. We'll see about that. Bottom line is we do it. That's the bottom line. The Rama writes, he wants to know, could someone from the opposite gender treat, take a pulse, take blood, and so forth? Bottom line is, Rama says we do it. We'll have to see why. Okay. Okay, so now let's talk about a woman in childbirth. At what point does she become a nida? Because it's very important to know. Because while you may be able to assist a woman into the hospital, but once she's considered a nida, you can't help her in. You can't help her in. You're going to have someone else help her in. So you say, what do you mean? It's sakanas nefashos.
It means you can't help her out either.
Sakanas nefashos. But if you're offering something which we consider derech korva, sakanas nefashos is not going to help you, because it may be yehareg ve'al yavar. Again, if your wife is considered a nida, and the support you're offering her is not just what we call derech eretz, but it's derech korva, you're holding her hand in an affectionate manner, even if it is sakanas nefashos, you may not be allowed to do it. So that's what we have to see. Okay?
But it's not in an affectionate manner as a lead into something, not at a time like that.
So the idea of leisikrevu is, even if it's not going to lead to it, the act of affection in and of itself, according to the Rambam, would be an Isser D'Oraisa.
Therefore, if the wife is giving birth and no one is around, just let her
So it depends.
do anything.
It depends. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. Okay. Let's see. At what point does a woman become a yoledes? At what point is she considered a woman in childbirth that she becomes a nida? Now, the first thing we have to know, look at number 6, yoledes afilu loiras adam tmea kanida. A woman who gives birth. Let's say she has a cesarean section and she doesn't see a drop of blood. She's a nida. She's a nida. Tamea benida. She's tame.
What is it? What does it mean when it says yoledes? Does that mean she's in her already?
Okay, well, we'll have to talk about
process?
cesarean later. That's not halacha l'maisa. But a woman who gives birth, even though she doesn't see dam, she's a nida.
She's in the process of giving birth?
She gave birth. She gave birth. Yoleda. She gave birth, even though she didn't see dam, she's considered nida. Fine? The baby comes out, yes blood, no blood, she's a nida, and like any other nida. Now, at what point does this begin? So we have in the Shulchan Aruch and the Aruch Chaim Siman Shin Lamed, Yoledes hi k'choila sheyesh by sakana. A woman who's in the process of giving birth is considered a choila in danger. In other words, it's not just like she has a little headache or stomach ache. She is a choila sheyesh by sakana. U'mechalin oleh haShabbos. You're allowed to be mechal Shabbos, right? You could make a phone call to the car service, help us go. You could call the Hatzalah. You could turn on the light. You could do any malacha. L'chol masha tzricha, whatever she needs. Karin la chachama. You could call, what's the chachama? The yoleda. You could call the doctor. You could call the midwife. By the way, there's a famous joke. You know the joke? Why is the midwife called chachama? You know why? Eizehu chacham. Haroyas hanoilad. Okay. Anyway, Karin la chachama. Right, that was a joke, by the way. And then Karin la chachama. You call a chachama mimakam lamakam from one place to another. Umayaldin oisa, and right, she could assist in the birthing process. Umalikin la nera filu hisuma. You could turn on the light, even though she's blind. So you say, well, why are you turning on the light if the woman's blind? She doesn't. Yeah, but she says it makes me feel more comfortable if I know the light is on.
You can't turn it off, though, of course. Let's turn it up.
Yeah, in other words, you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos even for something she doesn't need clinically. Even for some kind of psychological need that she has, that her attendants have light, you're allowed to be Machal Shabbos.
So again, this is before she gave birth?
So again, this is in the process. Now we're up to in the process. So we'll have to see exactly what does it mean to be in the process. And then the Rosh Hashanah says, whatever you could do with the shinoi, you should try to do with the shinoi. Okay, now let's get down to it. Precisely when does a woman become a yoledas? When she starts, shopping a lot. In the 9th month, they have the nesting urge. They start buying a lot of plastic bags. When exactly does she become a yoledas? When exactly does she become a yoledas? So the Shulchan Aruch gives us 3 criteria. Yeah, there are 3 criteria that a woman becomes a yoledas. This is in Aruch Chaim Siman Shin Lamed Sif Gimel, number 8. Nikreis yoledas achal aleh haShabbos mishateshev al hamashber. She's sitting on the birthing stool. She gets up onto that thing, right? Ready to. Once she sits on there, she's a yoledas.
Contraction, you mean?
What?
Contraction?
No. Once she's sitting on the birthing stool, when she's on that bed, when they put her on the bed designated for her to give it, yeah. So the contractions would not make a woman yoledas. A woman who starts having contractions, they hurt. She's not a nida yet.
Even the water broke?
Okay, we'll have to see about the water breaking. Okay, so the first thing is either she's on the mashber, she's on the birthing stool, right? Or in this week's Parsha it's called Uri Isen. Right, she's on the birthing stool. Or obviously when the blood is dripping forth, she's a nida. Even though that dam is not dam nida, it's dam taihar. But nevertheless, she is, right, it's dam of a yoledah. It's not dam taihar, but it's the dam of giving birth. So that's the second criteria. Or she can't walk anymore. If she's at the point she can't walk anymore,
what is the connection?
Now, interesting, I saw that the definition of she can't walk anymore, not because the contractions hurt so much that she can't walk anymore, it's because the position of the baby is low enough down, the baby's head is low enough down that's why she can't walk. The fact that the contractions hurt, I saw that would not render her a nida. So these are the 3 criteria. Either she's sitting on the mashber, or the blood is dripping forth, or she can't walk anymore. Kivan shenira echem elu. If you see one of these 3 signs, mechalalen oleh haShabbos, you'll have to be mechal Shabbos.
Yeah, but the third one is she could be in the 6th or 7th month also, and not be able to walk.
But because of the position of the baby?
Sure.
No.
Sure, why not?
Maybe dropped in the 6th or 7th month?
Sure, I mean, if some of them give birth in the 7
Only in the 9 months.
Oh, I see what you're saying, premature.
So I don't know.
It's not premature, well,
I mean, bed rest.
If the reason why she can't walk is because the baby's head is in the birthing process, which then ain't coming out back, so then maybe Taka, she does become. These are the 3 criteria of the Shulchan Aruch. Comes the Sidrei Tahara. Sidrei Tahara is one of the classic commentaries on Hilchos Nida, and he says Lav Davka. Lav Davka, that she has to be sitting on the birthing stool to render her Nida. Nearly the Lav Davka ba'isa shah sheyash v'ala majver. It's Lav Davka at that moment she's sitting on the birthing stool. Ela miyad she'achzuha tzirim b'chevlei leida. As soon as the contractions are starting, and she says, okay, let me call the doctor. The husband has to be careful. So the Sidrei Tahara is being revealing to us that what's the nakuda of these 3 things? The dam, the sitting on the birthing stool, the fact that she can't walk. All these 3 things indicate the kever has opened up. The womb has opened up. And we have a rule, ein psichas hakever b'loi dam. Once the womb opens up, blood comes out. Whether you see the blood or you don't see the blood, that's a klal in the Gemara. Once the kever opens up, there's dam. So says the Sidrei Tahara, you don't need her to actually be sitting on the birthing stool. When she feels enough pain that she says, call the doctor, she's a nida. That's the opinion of the Sidrei Tahara. As long as she is close enough to the birth, if she feels she needs to sit, even though she's not actually sitting, she's a nida. And we need to be concerned that had she had the doctor there, the doctor would say, quick, sit down. So even if she's not actually sitting on the mashmer, if she feels enough pain that she would have to call the doctor, she is a nida, according to the Sidrei Tahara. Says the Sidrei Tahara, what if she feels the need to sit, and then an hour later she says, I'm alright. I'm alright. And she gets back up. So he says, you don't have to worry about it. It was obviously a mistake, and you don't have to worry for psichas hakever. Obviously what? It was a false alarm.
And she's not.
And she's not. Says the Chavos Das. Who's the Chavos Das? Chavos Das is one of the extremely important commentaries on Hilchos Nida, written by the Nesivos HaMishpat, the Baal Plukta of the K'tzais HaChoshen, the Nesivos HaMishpat. So he writes an amazing thing. He quotes B'tshuvas Nun Shin. Now what's the Tshuvas Nun Shin? I think the Tshuvas Nun Shin is Nasan Shapira, the Megala Amukais. Megala Amukais, besides being a Makobal, was also Rav Nasan Shapira, right? Was also a big paisik. And I'll tell you why I think it's him. We'll see later on in the Tshuva Me'ava. The Tshuvas Rav Nasan Shapira writes, paisik be'isha sheyasha alamajur paska chavalim b'tzirayim d'tzricha zaynikim. The Rav Nasan Shapiro paskins a woman who sits on the birthing stool and then she says, never mind. And she gets up. He says, she's a nida. We don't believe in the false alarm. She's a nida. She doesn't give birth to 3 months later. Doesn't matter. She's a nida. That's the psak of Rav Nasan Shapiro. Because the Gemara says in Shabbos, when are you mechalo Shabbos? From the time she sits down on the birthing stool. Right? Because the Gemara says, when are you mechal Shabbos? From the psichas hakever. And the Gemara says, when is psichas hakever? When she sits down on the mashmer. And we know, ef shel psichas hakever v'leidam. What does the Chavos Das say? Well, anias daiti loy nirakain. Says the Chavos Das, I disagree with that. Why? The imkain hadam in the Mesayf Hasim b'yotzedem and the tahira minida. We know, excuse me, now like I said before, a woman who has a cesarean section is not a nida. You hear that? A woman who has a cesarean section is not a nida. I asked the Chavos Das, but what do you mean? She sat down on the birthing stool, and if according to the Gemara, if you sit down on the birthing stool, you're automatically a nida. So granted, no blood came out. Granted, the baby came out from her stomach, from the Yotzei Doifen. But still, she should be a nida. But what does it mean? So the Chavos Das tells us a tremendous klal. You ready for this? The din that ein psichas hakever b'lai dam, right? We have a rule that the womb will never open up without emanating blood. It's not true. It's not true. You know what the rule is? The womb will never open up and something come out of it without that thing coming out of it having blood in it. In other words, you know what the Gemara means? Ein psichas hakever b'lai dam? That if the womb opens up and a piece comes out, even though you don't see any dam in that piece, there's dam there. But there's no such rule that the womb cannot open up and not let out blood. It could. A womb could. In other words, the Gemara says that from the time the woman sits down in the birthing stool, her kever will open up. Says the Chavos Das, but that doesn't mean that blood will definitely come out. The rule of the Gemara is like this. The womb will never open up and some basar come out without dam. But it is possible for the womb to open up without dam.
If
okay?
nothing comes out.
If nothing comes out. Now, let's read that inside. Look on the fourth line over here. Right? Is it talking over there that she didn't sit down on the majra at all? Hainu dafka kishihipila eza davar the niftach hakever kol kach ad sheyatzimeno azarmino diyashvay dam. You know what the Gemara means that the kever cannot open up without dam? It means like this: if something substantial comes out of the kever and the kever is opening up that much to allow something substantial to come out, then dam has to come out. But it doesn't mean if the kever opens up a tiny bit that dam will have to come out. Now this is a very important chiddush.
But if something not suspension,
For example, like you asked earlier, let's talk about like what you mentioned earlier. Often before labor, what happens? The water breaks. So if the water breaks, is she a nida?
No.
If the woman's water breaks, is she a nida?
No, it's not done.
So what would we say? The Sidrei Tahara may say, maybe yeah. So the Shas Tshuva Me'ahava. Who's the Shas Tshuva Me'ahava? Rabbi Elazar Flackless, who is the Talmud Muvak, the primary disciple of the Noida B'Yehuda, and he writes the same chiddush as the Chavos Das. Look what he quotes. Look, Ba'al derech asher nishal shel isha achazut sirim v'chavolim. Right, a woman, she had contractions. The savra shegia eis livta, she thought it's time to give birth. V'shalcha achar hamialedes. Kvar diber imi b'zeh hamanoach hagam reinu Rav Meir Fishless zecher tzag levracha. V'haresi laheter. I paskin its mutter. Yeah? In other words, she thought she had to give birth, and then she gets up again.
But isn't it
Where?
The first line.
Once she sits down,
The
that's
fifth
it.
word. It's a chazuha.
Not sure. Okay. I don't know.
It's not him. As he feels it.
I don't know. He makes believe he feels it, right? He says, what do we need all of these newfangled chumros for? Ubal nun shin. Now, who did we say the nun shin was, right? Rav Shapiro. About the tshuva siman zayin. Machmer v'zeh. V'loi mashkichin b'dvarav. Uv'chaloi moisav. We don't listen to him or his dreams. So it seems like he's talking about somebody who must have been a big makabal. Yeah? So I think that's who he's referring to. Who cares if this is the beginning of the psichas hakever? Chazal amru ein psichas hakever leidam hainu hakever niftach v'yatz meno davar gush. The din that ein psichas hakever leidam is only if a substantive, something gush, mamoshes comes out. Right? Kamay vlad, oy chaticha, koshino dak kishvoferes, dak sho kashan, amrino devali yatzigam damimai. Aval psichas hakever levad. If the kever just opens up, I said, v'letzmeno davar gush, lo yomru shiyav shavloi dam. And then he says, look 4 lines from the end, aval kishalayatza davar. If nothing comes out, oy shayatza davar dak ma'oid, or something very fine comes out, or if the water starts to come out, we don't say this rule. Yeah? So the Shas Teshuvas Tshuva Me'ava seems to be saying that if the woman's water breaks, she's not a nida. She's not a nida. Now, how do we paskin? Look at number 12. This is from the Nishmas Avram, Dr. Dr. Abraham. He writes the following. He says, "Psichas haracham yiridas hamayim." He says, "Kenira shekshamayim hischilu lishtois v'lered." When the woman's water breaks, afal pi shemuter l'chalas haShabbos, even though you're allowed to be mechalas Shabbos at that time, right? From the time that a woman's water breaks, you're allowed to be mechalas Shabbos. You can make a phone call, you could turn on the light, but she's not a nida. Achem hi badka satzim l'matz adam. Now she should do a bedika. If her water breaks, let her do a bedika to make sure there's no dam. But if she doesn't find dam, she's tahar. Why? Why is she tahar? Kinei kasav atshuva me'ava b'shem Rabbi Noda B'Yehuda. So again, Nishnas Avram is saying that this chiddush of the tshuva me'ava, this is not his own chiddush. This is the chiddush of his Rebbe, the Noda B'Yehuda. He says, "Shelo yatsa davar, sheyatsa davar dakma oidai mashka, lo ya'amrinon em psichas hakav lo dam." Okay. Says the Nishmas Avram, we know the Nishmas Avram was very close with Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He wrote many letters to him. Says the Nishmas Avram, that's exactly what Rav Shlomo Zalman told me also. That from the time the woman's water breaks, she is not a nida. V'chein amar li Agon Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. V'chein amar li Moreno Rav. New word, Shlita?
Neuvert.
Yeah, he's
Neuvert, in Beit Dagan, Yerushalayim.
one of the Paiskim in
Shabbat.
yeah. Shem Badka Satzam Latzadam Tahira. He says like this, there are many women, their water break, having nothing to do with the labor. Okay. Then he talks about Lamaisa, if the water breaks, it could be serious. Because if the water level in the amniotic sac and in that area is diminishing, it could be dangerous for the baby. Okay. So therefore, Rav Shlomo Zalman says, Lamaisa, we do rely on the psak of the Shas Teshuvas Tshuva Me'ava, that from the time the water breaks, she is not a nida. Okay. So now let's talk about the following question. Let's say dam. Let's say there's dam. Dam comes out, or the baby's low enough she can't walk, or she's on the mashper. Let's say she's a halachic nida. Can the husband come in and offer moral support? Now, if he wants to say, go, that's one thing that he could do. Why not? But is he allowed to offer moral support in the form of physical contact? So we say, no, how can he? She's a nida. But on the other hand, we have a concept, and this concept is of tiruf hadas. And tiruf hadas means if you have a patient, and the patient, if you don't provide them a certain service, psychologically, they may not be able to handle the situation. That is cause to be lenient regarding certain halachas. So for instance, we have a shayla over here, number 13, in the Shas Teshuvas Minchas Yitzchak. Dayan Weiss, Chelek Dalet Simenches. He wants to know, you have a guy, Nebuch, he's in the hospital, and he has a certain kind of disease that whatever you bring into his room, they have to burn. Right? Unfortunately, right, there are certain diseases. He's a leper, or he has some kind of contagious disease that anything he comes into contact with, you're going to have to destroy. He says, I need a pair of tefillin. So what you can do, you give him a pair of tefillin, they're going to burn it. So you're causing tefillin to be burnt. But on the other hand, well, what's going to be with this guy? If you tell this guy, sorry, I can't give you tefillin, he's going to have chalishas hadas, because he's going to remember the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that says, Karkafta dolei munach tefillin, stay in Gehenim forever. He's never coming out of the Gehenim. So he's not going to realize he's an Einus, he can't, Hashem will excuse him. He's going to have a nervous breakdown if he doesn't have a pair of tefillin. So, perhaps, it should be permitted to send him in a pair of tefillin, because this may cause him, if you don't give him the tefillin, it may cause him to become crazy. He may become so demoralized by the fact he doesn't have tefillin that it may affect him physically. So this is what?
Yeah, one that's possible.
So he's going to make a bracha of atala then? You're going to cause it? Okay. So, interesting. So we have a tshuva over here. So Dayan Weiss writes over here that at first, it should definitely be prohibited to offer him a pair of tefillin. But he writes in Ois Beis, in number 13, that a certain Talmud Chacham pointed out to him that isn't it possible, he says, that if by refraining from giving him tefillin, you could cause tsar to the chayla, because he's going to be depressed. Here you have a God-fearing person. He doesn't want to consider himself one of those people, a body, a head, an item that doesn't have tefillin. This could cause a real a downward spiral in the health of the chayla. So maybe you could be makel to bring him tefillin. And the person who asked the Minchas Yitzchak said, and I asked the question to somebody by the name of Ha'admer Milavavish, and he told me I could do it. So the Minchas Yitzchak said, okay, that's a good point. It's a good point. We do find that because of the concept of Tiruf Hadas, we do have certain leniencies. For example, if you have someone on their deathbed, and they're about to die, and they want to give over certain items to their relatives. So even though technically speaking, you're now to make a kinyan on Shabbos, we do make a kinyan for a shchiv meira on Shabbos. Why? Because we don't want the person to become demoralized that he can't give over certain items to his loved ones. So the halacha, the Gemara says in Bava Basra, is you're allowed to make a kinyan on Shabbos for a shchiv meira. And even for something that is not really needed for the health of the sick person. For instance, we read in the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Shin Lamed, right? Let's say a woman says, I need you to turn on the light. And we say, what do you need us to turn on the light for? And we say to her, you're blind. You don't know if the light is turned on. She says, no. It just makes me feel more comfortable if the light is on. Now, is turning on the light clinically improving the situation of the woman? Of course not. But psychologically, she feels more comfortable if the light is on. So the halacha is you're allowed to turn on the light. Even though, what?
You could tell her that you turned the light without turning it on.
Oh, you want to say you... She
wouldn't know anyway.
Yeah, okay, if you could get away with it. But, you know? So that the halacha... So perhaps then... So the Dayan Weiss says, perhaps taka, for this sick person, who you're going to have to burn the tefillin, it would be permitted to send in a pair of tefillin to this person, even though, unfortunately, it's going to meet a disrespectful fate. So we have to investigate a little bit, is it permitted to offer moral support to a woman if she claims she needs it for her psychological and emotional well-being? Okay. So let's take a look in Yaradea, Siman Kuf Tzadihei. A husband who's a doctor, and he takes the pulse of his patients. Can he take the pulse of his wife, who is a nida?
That's not a form of
If he could take it from other women, why can't you take it?
Well, your wife shouldn't be your patient.
Well, by a wife who's a nida, it may be more, for instance, you're allowed to pass things to other women, but you can't pass things to your wife who's a nida. Why? Because we have to make more of a boundary, because since she's your wife, it may lead.
He's doing this professionally.
So that's the question. Can a husband treat his wife who is a nida in a professional manner? Says the Shulchan Aruch.
When she's a nida.
No.
When she's a nida.
When she's a nida. Shulchan Aruch says no. In Baila Roife, if a husband is a doctor, look at number 14, Halacha Yedzayin, Asr Lamashish Lahadefek. What does that mean? Asr Lamashish Lahadefek? Check the pulse. You can't. Can't draw blood. You can't treat her professionally. Says the Rama, that's for the Sfaradim. What about for the Ashkenazim? Says the Rama, based on what I wrote, that Heter, I wrote a dispensation. If she needs him, right, we said earlier that if a woman is in a sakana, that he could serve her, if there's no other doctor, and she needs him, and her life is in danger. So listen to this. Says Rama, let me give you a big heter. If the woman can't find another doctor, and her life is on the line, the husband could take the pulse. What does the Mechaber hold? That even if the woman's life is on the line, and the husband is needed to save her life, and if the only way to save her life is to take her pulse, cannot do it, says the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah says, if her life is on the line, he could do it.
What about assisting her in the birth itself? But that's more than negative pulse.
So then...
Shulchan Aruch is saying, let it die?
Yeah, that's what the Shulchan Aruch is saying, yes. Yeah. So the question is, how could that sound? That sounds a little extreme.
This is the pulse, but if you give the blood pressure, it's okay.
Without touching her at all?
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. 1 second. So the Shulchan Aruch says, listen, Shulchan Aruch says that even if the woman's life is on the line, the husband cannot treat her professionally. The Ramah says if her life is on the line, he can treat her professionally. Rabbi Say, what would you say this machlokes is based upon?
Touching by hand.
This machlokes is the machlokes we had in the beginning of the Shiur, whether other forms of affection that are not actual relations, is that an Isser D'Oraisa or is that an Isser D'Rabbanan? The Shulchan Aruch is going like the Shita of the Rambam, that even not only relations, but even chibuk, nishuk, or other forms of affection are an Isser D'Oraisa. Now, Isser D'Oraisa means Gilui Arayas. Gilui Arayas means you can't even save someone's life to be involved with it, and that's why the Shulchan Aruch paskins that even though the husband is a doctor and he's treating her professionally, he can't take her pulse. And the Ramah seems to be paskining like who? Like the Ramban. That it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan, and therefore b'makam sakanas nefashos it's mutter. So that's exactly what the Shach says for starters. Take a look in the Shach number 15. Umihu im ha'chayla mesukan, if the chayla is in a sakana, ve'ein sham roifim, and there are no doctors, mash mektsas midivrei tshuvas haramban, it would appear from the Ramban, siman kuf chav zayin, the sharim nei pikuach nefesh. So then the Shach says, yeah, very nice the Ramban says it would be permitted, because the Ramban is going l'shitase that regular korva is only an Isser D'Rabbanan. He's going according to his opinion, the Svirle Dinegias Nida Eino Elam Jabanan. Aval Rambam, but the Rambam's opinion, Dinegias Erva Asur Minat Torah, that touching an Erva is Asur Minat Torah. Hachaf Apisha Yesh Pikuach Nefesh Efshir the Asur Mishama Bezra de Gilei Arayas. You hear this? According to the Rambam, to touch an Erva, even though it's going to mean saving their life, can't do it. According to the Rambam, if you need to rescue someone, and that means touching an erva, can't do it. For starters. The Ramban would say, you could do it. The Rambam would say, you can't do it. Comes the Shach, and the Shach says, not so fast. Really, I'll tell you, right, the way we're learning right now, the Ramah, who says that a doctor is allowed to treat his wife who is a nida, right? That's what Ramah says. We're learning the Ramah is going according to the Shita of who? Ramban. Says the Shach, no. I'll tell you the Ramah agrees to the Rambam. That really affection to an erva is an Isser D'Oraisa and you have to give your life. But says the Ramah, taking the pulse is not affection. That's not korva, which is affectionate. That's korva, which is not, that's professional. So the reason why the Ramah permits it is not because he holds like the Ramban that touching or that hugging or kissing is only an Isser D'Rabbanan. No, really he holds it's an Isser D'Oraisa. But what's Pshat in the Ramah? The Pshat in the Ramah is you're not doing it derech chiba, you're not doing it derech ava. And that's why the Ramah paskins halacha l'maisa to take the pulse is permitted, not because he's lenient regarding harchakos, that it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. He holds harchakos is an Isser D'Oraisa. This is not korva. This is very important. He says. So that's debatable. Right?
I'm not discussing that.
Yeah. It depends, right? It's certainly taking a pulse is not chiba, but to give a handshake.
You meet someone, how do you do? That's korva?
That
could be their hurts.
All right, let's not.
That is a discussion, right? Ve'ei nira. Says the Shach, this is not how to explain Machlokes Mechaber Rama. Devadai afla harambam leker Isser D'Oraisa. Ela kisha kein derech taiva v'chivas bia. According to the Rambam, the Isser of Harchakos is only when it's derech taiva v'chibas bia. Masha ein kein hacha. V'chein, that's what the Rambam concludes. V'chein hamina kapashit sharoifim Yisraelim memashmishin hadafek shal isha afilu eishasish oyavois kachavim af al pi sheyesh roifim acherim oyvdei kachavim. That's why halacha l'maisa Rambam says a doctor will take the pulse of a woman or his wife when she's a nida, or another woman, even when there are other doctors. Why? Because it's not negia derech taiva, it's just regular negia, which if there's a need for, it would be permitted according to the Ramah. Now, I don't know if the Sfardim rely on this Ramah. I have a feeling they may. Right?
Do the Sfardim see doctors of the opposite?
I don't know. I can't answer that. I think the minhag pasha that the Shach says is that to rely on this psak of the Ramah. So this, therefore, it comes out halacha l'maisa that even though the Shulchan Aruch seems to say that even negia, which is not derech taiva, perhaps would be yeharg ve'al yavar, the Ramah disagrees with that. So what would you say about a husband who is in the hospital room and he wants to offer moral support? Would that be permitted?
It's very big, much chiba.
So the question is, what is he doing? If he's offering an affectionate type of support, no, he certainly cannot do that. Not according to anybody. What about if, she needs to squeeze him, because she's screaming? That you have to leave to the paiskim to decide. Is that derech chiba or is that professional? I don't know. I'm not going to.
Why to him and not to the chair? Because it's a chiba.
Yeah. Look, right, exactly. Well, why don't we, let the janitor come in. Let her squeeze the janitor's neck. No. I have to hold my husband's hand. Why my husband? It offers what?
It offers her comfort.
So that we have to decide. That we have to come to a proper conclusion. Is that derech chiba? If it's derech chiba, it would not be permitted. If it's not derech chiba, then if it's considered professional, if she says, okay, either your hand or the janitor's hand, so then maybe taka, you could squeeze the husband's hand. Fine. What about, would it be permitted with a glove?
Yeah. It's a shiurim.
Would it be permitted with a glove? So the shayal, look at number 16. The shayal to Dayan Weiss, he wants to say like this, that the Ramah, remember the Ramah gave a heter that a man is allowed to take the pulse of a woman because it's not considered negia derech taiva. So the Pischei Tshuva brings down from the Makar Chayim, you know what, you're better off doing it through a cloth. So somebody writes to Dayan Weiss, to the Minchas Yitzchak, Dayan Grusnas, and he wants to say, well, if the Pischei Tshuva says that even though the Ramah gives a heter, you should use a cloth to take the pulse, so maybe I'll let a husband go into the delivery room, and we'll let them hold hands if he's wearing a glove. So Dayan Weiss says that one thing has nothing to do with the other. When it comes to taking a pulse, that is certainly professional. And the Ramah said you don't need to wear a glove. So the Pischei Tshuva says, you know what? Let's make things even better. L'ravcha de milsa, wear a glove. But where something is usher because it might be derech chiba, says Dayan Weiss. In other words, Dayan Weiss holds holding hands is derech chiba. Wearing a glove does absolutely nothing. You're allowed to go over a woman, hold her hand because you're wearing a glove? Of course not. It's not a din in, skin to skin. That makes absolutely no difference at all. The definition of negia, the definition of touching is not specific direct contact. It's not a din in mechitza. It's not a din in chatzitza. Right? Oh, if there's a band-aid, so it's mutter. There's no din chatzitza. Negia means al yedei davar acher. That's also negia. That's also negia. So therefore, Dayan Weiss says the fact that the Pischei Tshuva adds that when a doctor takes the pulse of a woman, it's better to do it through a cloth. That's because meikar hadin, it's mutter. So the Ravcha de Milsa, a cloth helps. But Dayan Weiss says if something is considered derech chiba, a cloth is not going to do anything. So bottom line, is a husband allowed to be in the room? So Dayan Weiss writes in number 17 in Chelak Chesim and Lamed, he says, no, if you ask me, I would not allow it. Why? Because, first of all, according to Dayan Weiss, you can't have Negiah. You can't have Negiah even through a glove. And he can't even look at her. He can't, right? When the baby is coming out, there are parts of her which he's not allowed to look at. So what are we going to tell him? Go in there, be in the room, but stick your head in the corner. It's not going to happen. He's going to look at something he's not authorized, not halachically allowed to look at. So Dayan Weiss says, I can't authorize. He says like this. Look at number 17. The beis hacholim sharei tzedek kan kasher shalu aisi al zeh. When they asked me at this, amarti lesser. I said you can't do it unless her life is on the line. That if he's not going to be in the room, she's b'sakanas nefashos. Im habalo yiyasham ki yadati im yatiru yavayim mashalem. Says Dayan Weiss, if I matter this, even though technically there would be nothing wrong if the guy came in the room, put a bag over his head, and stayed there. But it's not going to happen. Because he's going to want to offer support, and he's going to be in a situation where he's looking at something he's not allowed to look at. By the way, Dayan Weiss says, they're not the conclusion yet, but Dayan Weiss says, this idea with the guy who wants to wear the tefillin, we're afraid of tir of hadas, he says, don't mix it up with kalos hadas. What's kalos hadash? He said, the Gemara tells nashim daitan kalos. He says the fact that a woman says, I need you to be here, that doesn't mean tir of hadas. The fact that a woman expresses a certain need doesn't necessarily mean if she doesn't have it, she's clinically, something bad is going to happen. She's in a moment of weakness and she expresses her need, but don't confuse tir of hadas with kalos hadash. And Dayan Weiss's conclusion is the husband shouldn't be there. However, Rav Moshe Feinstein paskins in Yaradei Chelik Beis Siman Ayin Hey, Rav Moshe says he doesn't see a problem if the husband is there. He doesn't feel there's anything wrong if the husband is there.
You stand by the head, not by the...
Yeah, that's
right.
You always stand anyway.
You stand in the front, right? You stand at the head.
You can.
Right? Look, he says over here, V'mabal yachal li shama, the last paragraph, if the husband could be there, lahashkiach shetasa dav. Everybody knows today it's very important to have an advocate in the hospital, right? Because, so they don't think, instead of delivering a baby, they don't think it's an appendix or something, right? Everybody knows that if somebody's being treated in the hospital, it could be mamish sakanas nefashos if they don't have an advocate there making sure things go right. So Moshe says, right, v'gam l'chazek oisa, the purpose of him being there is to offer moral support, la'ametz liba, hinei yesh tzarech, if there's a need, any royeser, I don't see a problem. Moshe says, I don't see a problem if the husband is there. And even if she doesn't need it, even if she says, the husband says, if you need me to be there, I'll be there for you. She says, I don't need you. Right? But even so, even if she says, it's okay, you go home, make sure the house is clean when I get home. Right? Even if she says that, he's still allowed to be there. Rav Moshe says, but, you can't look at the baby coming out. You're not to look at the child coming out. While she's a nida, you're not to look at those parts of the body that are usually covered. And the makam torfa itself, oisay makam itself, you're never allowed to look at. So if Rav Moshe says, if he's going to be careful not to look, he could be there. What about if he wants to look through a mirror? Also not good. Can't look. So Moshe, I guess, has more confidence that people will be able to be there and not violate the halacha. So Moshe says, mutter. Moshe says, mutter. Rav Henkin writes on this heter of Rav Moshe. Now this is not Rav Henkin, Rav Eliyahu Henkin. This is Rav Henkin's grandson. Shas Chuvas B'nei Banim. Rav Henkin has a grandson who wrote, I think, the Shas Chuvas B'nei Banim. He writes 1, 2, 3, 4. What?
The chronology was off. It would be Rav Henkin first and then Rav Henkin.
Yeah, so look at the Nishmas Avram brings down that Rav Henkin writes that don't make Rav Moshe's heter across the board heter. Rav Moshe meant to say that if there's a reason for the husband to be there, he should be there. And only someone who definitely will be careful not to violate those things he's not allowed to do, only such a person is allowed to be there. If the woman's afraid, right? In other words, Rav Henkin is saying Rav Moshe only meant it if there's a need, if the woman needs it. Right? Probably in most cases the woman does need it. But you have to, the point is that this is a serious issue, because the person can potentially violate Isurim. So therefore he says, a person has to make sure he is going to be careful. But then he writes like this: those hospitals that forbid the husband to be there, or forbid a midwife to be there, he says, the rabbis are not happy with these hospitals. He says, it's almost karev l'shvichas damim. To make a rule, the husband can't come, that could be demoralizing. Because even if the husband is not there, at least she knows he could be there if she needs him. But to make a rule, to make a halacha, he's not allowed to be there, that's like bloodshed, he said. That's close to bloodshed. But then he says like this: what if you're in some of these hospitals, where you have 8 women in the same room and you just divide it off by curtains, right? And now this woman wants her husband to be there, but the other 7 women who are crying their lungs out, they don't need this guy standing there. They don't want him there. They want to scream without being embarrassed. So in that case, just because he wants to comfort his own wife, he's not make the other women be uncomfortable. Okay, but then he says, we'll end off with something that's very interesting. He quotes from the Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He says, nowadays, you have a lot of different situations where women say, oh yeah, I need this, and if I don't have it, I'm going to become crazy. Right? They have a lot of different needs. So how do we know? That's what he's saying. I'm not from. How do we know which types of emotional needs we're allowed to recognize? What? You said it, right? Which type of emotional needs do we consider halachically, and which ones do we not? So he says like this. He writes on the bottom from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. He says, "Ach amar li hagan Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach shaloi dami." Not every need is a need. Let's say a woman says, "When I give birth, I want there to be 50 roses, and I want a whole bouquet of balloons." Right? But it's Shabbos. Where are you going to get it from? I need it. Go get it quickly. Why is it different than a woman who's blind says, I need you to turn on the light? I mean, what needs are valid needs? What needs are not? Every woman has her needs, right? So Shlomo Zalman says the rule is like this: something that is already accepted, that this is something that people need, right? Something that's halachically recognized as a need. Let's say a suma, someone who's blind, or someone who says he has heartache. So it doesn't matter. If they say they need something, all bets are off. You're allowed to be Machal Shabbos for that, right? But some type of things, we don't have any official standard that these are things that people need. Just because the modern trends or it's in vogue to need certain things, those type of things are not halachically recognized. He says, "V'rak ekev moide bechevra hamodarnis." A woman says, she needs to go on a 3-month vacation on Shabbos. So, shkoyach. Yeah, but, halacha doesn't recognize that particular need. The fact that she claims she needs that's not halachically recognized. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, some kind of modern, invented need, you're not only not to be machal Shabbos, you're not to violate an Isser D'Rabbanan. All of a sudden, a woman says, turn on I need to hear music while I'm giving birth. Music? Who ever heard that a woman needs music when she's giving birth? But she says she said, if I don't have music, that's it. I'm going to start, I'm going to buy another pair of shoes if you don't play music for me. So then, the halacha is we don't recognize that need, and it's only something that has a long-standing acceptability. In other words, let's say the woman says, I need you to hold my hand. We don't find in halacha that if you don't hold someone's hand, they're going to have, they're going to be demoralized. So this is not something halachically recognized. So unless we know for sure that this is a specific case where she needs it, otherwise a person should avoid it. Rabbi Glatstein, have a wonderful.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.